Hmm? Ah! Oh.
Faith, you're hurting people. You're hurting yourself.
That's not it. That's not what bothers you so much. What bugs you is you know I'm right. You know in your gut. We don't need the law. We are the law.
No.
Yes. You know exactly what I'm about because you have it in you, too.
No, Faith, you're sick.
I've seen it, B. You've got the lust. And I'm not just talking about screwing vampires.
Don't you dare bring him into this.
It was good, wasn't it? The sex, the danger. At a party, we even dug him when he went psycho.
No.
See, you need me to toe the line because you're afraid you'll go over it, aren't you, B? You can't handle watching me live in my own way, having a blast because it tempts you. You know it could be you. There's my girl.
No, I'm not gonna do this.
Why not? It feels good. Blood rising.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Still Slaying, a Buffyverse podcast. I'm Penny.
And I'm Kirk.
And I'm Kara. This episode, we're going to be discussing Season 3, Episode 15, Consequences, directed by Michael Gershman and written by Marty Noxon. The original air date on this one was February 16th of 1999.
There were some alternative titles in other languages for this episode, including Above the Laws in French, Made to Kill in Italian, and The Consequences of That in Japanese. I kind of like The Consequences of That.
Yeah, and the Italian one's always so much more dramatic.
I'm confused. Yeah, what are the language? So in French, they called it something different?
Yeah, when the episode was released in France, the titles are a little different.
That's interesting.
Usually the Polish one gives us a chuckle, but this time I'm really
this time it just
the consequence.
Everything just translated to consequences for the most part. These were the only three
that were kind of
any different.
So
Above the Laws. That's interesting.
Yeah. You've just heard the voice of Kirk, who is our guest for this episode. Welcome, Kirk, to Still Slaying.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on. Great to be here with you guys.
If you are a Podcastica listener, you've probably heard Kirk before on some of our Marvel-related podcasts. He was one of the hosts for the What If podcast and the Echo podcast. I worked with him on that one. And he also guested. Oh, and he did Lokiverse. I was not on that one. He also guested with Greg and me on She-Hulk. Yep. And it was a lot of fun. Kirk is a fabulous artist, and he does
you're generous.
A lot of like tribute art and things in the science fiction and comic book universe. And I recently commissioned a piece from him for our very own Kara for her birthday.
Share that.
We'll put it up on Instagram. It's pretty awesome.
Sexy Giles.
Yeah, it's good when I instantly started giggling when I saw it. So.
Yeah, that is awesome.
That works.
I love when people laugh at my work.
That's the intended effect, right?
I'm teasing.
We'll include Kirk's information in the show notes. It's studiokm.com if you want to see his work. And we'll put some pieces on our Instagram so you can take a look at it. But Kirk, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with Buffy? Did you watch it when it first came out?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, first of all, thanks again for having me on. And I have been a Buffy fanatic since season 1. It was such a unique, it was kind of the beginning of a certain kind of storytelling in TV that I just love, which is this more kind of full season arc stories that evolve over time with as opposed to episodic, the villain of the week kind of thing, and similarly at that time, Babylon 5, I don't know if any of you were into sci-fi, but Babylon 5 was also around that time. And they were also doing that kind of thing. And so I was, it's a very comic book kind of storytelling style. You've got a new villain or conflict going on each issue, but there's always lots of character development and bigger arc, usually in a 6 or a 12 issue run of that you're learning about each book. And so I just naturally took to that storytelling style. Also, the I think the friend group, the connection with the tight friends relationships and how they treated that in Buffy was very different than most TV at that time, and I think was very not addicting, but enjoyable to watch. You know what I mean? You
Yeah,
get
the sort of
these side,
found family thing
yeah, and the side
that
Yeah.
characters that don't just play a side role. They
Right.
often are quintessential to an
fleshed out.
episode, or they're fleshed out. The relationships between everybody. Yeah, it's definitely Buffy's show, but it's really Buffy and her family.
yeah.
So yeah, and I was really drawn to that. So plus, vampires and action, and the writing style was very young and youthful and fresh and funny, and at the same time, the action and the fight scenes were unique at that time. They really spent time getting them to look good and feel right, as opposed to being just cow, bam, smash. They really felt like they were brawling on a street. And those are all things that I was really drawn to. So yeah, I've been a Buffy fan since day one. In fact, I got a bit obsessive. I would illustrate Buffy stuff. I shared with you guys that I did a tribute piece of what would happen if Buffy teamed up with Blade, and because at that time Blade was a big Marvel film that came out roughly around that time, and when I first started watching that, and I just I think I just was really drawn to the sci-fi elements as well as the horror elements, and just really enjoyed it. So I loved it so much. In fact, I introduced it to my kids when they got old enough, and of course they loved it. So went through it all again. And I had already watched every season, both all the shows, Angel, many times. So, but then we went through it all again, and it's one of the few series that I've been able to do that with and really enjoy it each viewing. And it's unique in that way. There's no real bad episodes, and it's just as fun to watch it from beginning to end every couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't know of any other series that I feel that way about.
That's
So
great that you could share it with your kids. I have been
Yeah.
trying to get my niece and nephew to watch it for years. And they keep saying like, "Oh yeah, we'll get to it, Auntie Penny. Like we'll get
Aw.
there." And I'm like, "Oh, I can't."
I think that it is finally, it lasted longer than most series in terms of aging, but I think it's finally starting to feel a little bit dated. Especially those. In fact, I can't really watch season 1 anymore.
Yeah.
It's
Season
just
1 does not
so.
hold up.
No, I mean
No.
it was weak to
It's
begin
rough.
with, but now it really feels separated from life experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we enjoyed it as a family a lot. In fact, I shared with you that guys that we did this project once where we loved the book that Giles carries around, the vampire. I don't know how to pronounce it, Vampira or something.
Well,
But
how does Andrew say it? Vampire.
Vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vampire.
and so we went out and bought books from old books at old bookstores and brought them home, and then decoupaged and did all this foam cutout stuff and painted them. Found YouTube videos on how to create that book, and so we just made craft projects out of it and did stuff, all
That's
sorts
so
of
cool.
stuff to tie into the
Yeah.
show. Yeah, they loved it.
We have pictures of this book that Kirk made with his kids. We'll put that on the Instagram as well. It's really cool and looks
Yeah.
exactly like
Turned
the
out
one on TV. It's amazing.
Don't
I
open
can
it though.
see Andrew in front of the fireplace in his little robe sipping. What was he
Yeah.
drinking? Like
Oh.
scotch or whiskey or something.
I'm
that
sure
looked
Andrew
like
wasn't
scotch.
actually drinking scotch in
No.
that scene.
I
I'm
think
sure it
there
was like
may have
iced
actually
tea.
been a
Iced tea,
joke
yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
can't see
perfect.
Andrew being a scotch guy.
He could try, and it would
Didn't
not work
didn't
out.
he use a pipe sometimes?
I don't think he lit the pipe. I think he just chewed on the
No,
pipe.
just chewed
Yeah,
on
and
it.
had it.
Yeah.
Fully prop.
Too
Well,
funny.
let's go back to 1999
Yeah.
and remember what was going on in the country at that
Wow,
time.
sound effects and everything.
Yeah, we do.
Mhm.
This is top notch.
Yeah, we're fancy over here. So, first up, the number one song in the United States is still Angel of Mine by Monica. And now the number one song in the UK is Fly Away by Lenny Kravitz. And I remember that song being on repeat
Yeah.
during that time, for sure.
Lenny Kravitz is still a hot commodity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So good for him.
I didn't remember Angel of Mine, so I played it when I got the agenda,
yeah.
and I was like, I still don't remember this song. I think because at that time of my life, I was so busy with
Yeah.
law school that I just didn't have time for any pop culture except for the very few select things that I made time for. So it was like, if it wasn't Buffy
Yep.
or Charmed or Batman Beyond, I didn't watch it on TV. And if it, and if it wasn't music I already had on CD, I didn't hear it. Like I was just really,
They
really
need to make a
focused.
Batman Beyond movie.
Oh yeah.
They really do. They
Oh
really
yeah.
do.
I really want that so much.
They should bring Christian Bale back as an old Bruce Wayne to play
That
that
would
role.
be
Yeah.
That would be
very interesting.
amazing.
That'd
Timothy
be cool.
Chalamet, I'm sure, would get cast as
Oh
Terry
yeah.
McGinnis. Yeah,
I'd be okay with that.
I'd be
He
fine with
can
it.
stay.
Yep.
So in the U.S. box office, number one was Saving Private Ryan. Fantastic film.
Man.
Still a
Yes.
good rewatch. 2, Patch Adams. And 3, Prince of Egypt.
Yeah.
Don't remember the other 2 too well.
Patch Adams is not good.
I don't remember very much about that movie except him wearing a clown nose at one point.
Yeah, that was
That's
on all the
all that
posters.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's
but
it.
Saving Private Ryan was an amazing film.
Yeah, that was a dominant
watch.
force at the box
Yeah.
office that year.
Whew.
What was
Yeah.
Prince of Egypt?
It's
It's an animated movie about Moses.
Ah.
I don't think
I
I've
don't
seen
remember
it.
if it was a Disney one. I just remember churches, being in Texas. I remember churches being all thrilled that something about
That Moses was out. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. On the day that the episode aired, February 16th, there was an annular solar eclipse, although it was largely not visible in the US, unlike the one we just had.
Yeah, that was
Kurdish
awesome.
rebels took over Greek and Kenyan embassies across Europe and held hostages after the two countries helped Turkey arrest one of their rebel leaders, Abdullah Öcalan. O.J.
Wow.
Simpson's 1968 Heisman Trophy is sold for $230,000 to help settle a $33.5 million civil judgment against Simpson for the deaths of his ex-wife Nicole Brown and her friend Ron Goldman.
Oh, OJ.
And O.J.
Well, that's
just
significant.
passed away this
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
Oh
Timing.
no.
And nobody really mourned that. It was the news
No.
was always like, and here's a piece of news. Like nobody
Yeah.
was. We
My
all have very
favorite was
mixed feelings
people-
about OJ.
I remember getting up and putting having breakfast and looking at TikTok, and for some reason all my TikToks were the Bronco chase, and I'm like, what?
Oh my
why is
Like, what
is
is
this all of a
happening?
sudden on?
Jeez. Although that was in April, I'm pretty sure. So that's kind of interesting. It all comes back around.
Let's see. During this week that the episode aired, on February 20th, 1999, the Toronto Maple Leafs play their first NHL home game at Air Canada Centre. I did not realize that.
Mhm.
On February 21st, 1999, Lahore Declaration was signed between India's Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Pakistan's Nawaz Sharif on use of nuclear weapons. Wow.
That is significant because not too long before this, and we talked about this on the podcast, there had been some nuclear weapons testing going on, and the tensions between those two countries were really on the rise. So
Yeah, and that still flares up all the time.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, England, for the partition that created that conflict. All right,
Is
let's
that
get it.
That's a Ms. Marvel reference, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I loved Ms. Marvel. Very undervalued show. I thought it was really brilliant. All right,
Yeah, it's good.
let's get into the discussion. And since Kirk is our guest, he gets to start us off. Where would you like to go first, Kirk?
Well, Faith has always been one of my favorite Buffy characters. It's why when you gave me an options of episodes, I chose this one because I really, I always was drawn to that character. I think because she's a version of Buffy that's, was more the wild, cut loose, no sense of responsibility kind of aspect of her. It's kind of like, what if, Buffy wasn't as principled a person, so it's kind of a chance to see it. But then more than that, she's very complex. She really wants to be loved and cared about. And because of that, I think she carries this chip on her shoulder from her hard knock life. And, she envies Buffy and her friends. I think all of that makes her a very sad and tragic character as well. And to me, that's a rich character. This episode, just really solidifies that for me. I mean, this is where it's kind of like her brokenness really comes through.
Oh yeah.
And, so for me, she's just a really powerful presence on the screen. I think also Eliza Dushku did a fantastic job with her.
Yeah.
She threads that needle of, being torn inside, but, having a hard exterior. And I just really enjoyed her. And then I'll tie into that as well. The whole Faith Angel dynamic was always also one of my favorite relationships because especially on the Buffy spinoff there, the Angel show. I mean, his need to help her find redemption was so tied up in his own struggle to deal with his guilt and redemption issues. It just made for great TV. The fact that he could kind of see through all of her bravado and cut right to the heart of the matter with her, and really cared and really wanted to help her. And of course, we don't get that. We get a little bit of that. We get the start of that in this episode, which is beautiful. But you really start to understand her better when you realize that he is really the only one that can kind of relate to what her life has been. So I just that's my standout for this.
Yeah, I love the Faith and Angel relationship, and I don't want to get into too many spoilers, and we could talk about that at the end in the spoiler section, but there is a lot of payoff to it as the show goes on. We're going to get to see more of Faith and Angel interacting, and I like that it gives a depth and a purpose to Angel that he didn't have before.
Yeah.
Because before, his entire plot was about being in love with Buffy. It's funny because usually only women characters get a plot that's entirely about who they are in love with.
Centered on,
Yeah. It made Angel a little bit one note at times.
Yeah.
When
absolutely.
he turns evil in season 2, there's tons of complexity and it's really interesting. But in this season 3, up until this point, he sort of deals with the Scooby Gang not trusting him and coming back to town, and then you're sort of done. And then adding in this relationship with Faith adds layers to him, as well as just diving deeper and deeper into what makes Faith so interesting. And I love it.
Something that just it works so well, and it works very well to set up. We all know that there's Angel gets a spinoff, but this particular dynamic, I think, is what really makes that spinoff work. Is him kind of figuring out his purpose and what he can do to help people. And it's just so funny too, watching Angel deal with Faith and then seeing Xander attempting to come in and relate to her, and he gets this nihilistic response essentially from Faith, and it scares him shitless basically. But it's just, Angel is on par with Faith. Angel can handle her, both like the physicality that comes along with trying to deal with and wrangle Faith, and her her morbidity and nihilistic comments. Like, it doesn't sway him. It doesn't make him balk in the slightest.
Yeah, he's
So
seen it all. So
ugh,
Well,
Faith doesn't frighten him.
he has his dark side,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
and he knows where she's at. You know what I mean? He's been there. Whereas none of the other Scooby Gang, including Buffy, can relate to that, and therefore it's hard for them to connect with her or have compassion for her in the way that needs to be done. You know, they can't see past the pain that she's inflicting, and you know, he can. So
And
Yeah.
she can respect him because she knows about his
Right.
dark past. Whereas
Right.
whenever Buffy says to her, like, "No, we can help
Right.
you," she's like, "You don't even
Yeah.
get it." But
Right.
Yeah.
No,
with
that's a great point. That's a
with
great point.
Angel, she respects him in a way she can't really respect the others.
Yeah.
Because, like, what Buffy thought she may have killed a man for, what, maybe a
A
few
day,
hours
yeah,
with Ted. And, you know, that was hard for Buffy. But at the same time, Buffy had her mother there who supported her, and Giles, and a support system in
Right.
place that
Right.
she felt safe going to. Whereas Faith has already, we've seen her play into, you know, she already feels isolated, she felt excluded, and she's been going down that path more and more as the season progresses. And Angel is the only person that could have any hope of actually reaching her where she's at this point.
It's very metaphoric almost for drug addiction
oh
or
yeah,
alcohol addiction, and that,
Yeah.
you know, he is kind of becomes, with this episode, he starts to become her sponsor, you know,
yeah.
and in that way it's beautiful. And to your point, I agree, you know, can start to connect with him because she knows he really does understand what she's going through. Whereas to your point, the others don't.
Yeah,
I
she's
agree.
like, "You've never killed anyone. You don't, you know,
Right.
you didn't have a
Yeah.
difficult life. You don't know what evil is. Like, you just don't get
Right.
me." Um,
Well, and having that power, how much like strength and power she has, like she can cause a lot of harm. And we see that in this episode. A rogue slayer is something that's incredibly dangerous. And Angel is the same way. He has a lot that he needs to control. And not just, you know, being a vampire and having strength, but even being around Buffy.
and
I
his
feel like,
love, yeah,
yeah.
the he has a lot of experience keeping himself in check,
Mm-hmm.
and he can give that wisdom to Faith. I have
Yeah.
a plot question. I'm hoping you guys might have an opinion on. So
Hmm.
when Angel shows up at Faith's motel room and knocks her out and takes her back to the mansion, do you think
Yeah.
Buffy sent him, or that he thought of that on his own? Because we see him earlier, like skulking around, like he goes to the murder scene and he looks at the murder scene, and then he like follows the detective around, and then he's outside Faith's hotel room when the detective leaves. He's got a thoughtful look on his face. So is he following Faith and sees what's going down with Xander and jumps in? Or has Buffy decided, after that conversation with the gang about who do you think could reach Faith, did she go to Angel and say, "Can you try to reach Faith?"
I always assumed he was being lurky Angel and following her, knowing that she was a potential problem. Because even though, you know, Buffy still has some weird tension and issues about Faith and Angel, you know, they get worse, but that's for later.
Yeah.
But
Dramatically.
I just do not see Buffy going to Angel in that moment.
But
At
then
least that's how
she's
I read
there
it.
at the mansion when he comes back with Faith, and
Yeah.
seems to be, collaborating with him. It's
Yeah,
just
my impression when I watched it was that he was kind of working on his own,
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
having picked up on what was going on and kind of realizing what was going to need to be done, even though the others weren't clear about what needed to be done.
Yeah.
But I think that, and then I assumed he just immediately reached out to Buffy and to bring her in. But I think it's an interesting question because it could very well have been.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was done
Yeah.
vaguely on purpose, but it is a good question because I could see her also reaching
Yeah.
out to him. They have a connection that is unique.
I think I
because of their love
figured
for each
that.
other, you know?
Yeah,
So she
Buffy and
may have
Angel.
reached out to him and said, hey, I really, I
Yeah.
need help on this situation. And he's like, I got you covered, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't know if she specifically maybe directed him or if they had a vague conversation about
Yeah.
what may need to happen,
Yeah.
or if, he knocked her out,
The only,
said
the only
that,
reason
and then paged Buffy.
yeah,
Or
I
Vanda
think
Like,
called
that,
her. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
paged. That's right. Beeped her.
yeah.
um, the only thing is that we were seeing him following her from the beginning of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, and it was clear Buffy didn't know what to do or where to go or who to talk to or how to approach this um, till after she had met and talked with Giles and everything else. So I don't, that leads me to think that maybe they, came together before he went and got her, but
Mm-hmm.
he had already been on a mission, I think.
Yeah, we saw last episode, when he runs into Buffy and she has the blood on her hands and she's like, "Don't worry about it." That he clocked it and he was like, "That is something
Right.
to worry about. I got to
Yeah.
follow up on that."
And then it comes back, and when he's visiting the crime scene,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's like,
he
"Oh,
sees the
that's the
blood on
same
the
blood."
walls, right? And then he
It
sees
made
her
me
hand in a
wonder
flesh.
if he could, if the smell
I'm
Yeah,
was
sure.
something
yeah,
I
he'd
feel like
recognize.
this is slightly not really spoilery, but I think at some point in Angel, we learn that the ability to like tell where blood came from, like this blood is from that person,
Oh
is
yeah,
a vampire trait. Like I think he
mhm.
could tell that
which
the
makes
blood on
sense.
Buffy's hands was from a human and that it was not her blood. And then when he went to the
Mm-hmm.
crime scene, he's like, "Yep, match. That's the blood I smelled before."
Yeah,
If
that
Oz
makes
can
sense.
smell Willow's fear, I feel like the vampire senses of blood should be that heightened too.
Yeah.
That checks out.
Creepy ability, but it kind of makes for a good vampire detective to have
Mm, yeah,
built-in forensic abilities when
Yeah.
you're investigating, bloody crime
they should have
scenes.
played that up more in his spinoff.
Yeah, like
Really
more
should have.
smelling blood and following blood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's like a bloodhound
the Bloodhound. I knew
Yeah.
one of us
Yeah.
was gonna go there.
Perfect. Oh man.
So let's talk about Faith's trauma some more. And,
Oh,
last time we had Sam with us, who's a psychologist, and we talked about trauma. And
mm-hmm.
it continues in this episode that we get to see the results of the trauma, the downward spiral that Faith is in, right? She starts off at the end of last episode, she's like, "I don't care." And then
Mm-hmm.
as we move through this episode, her approach to the murder changes from "I don't care" to, you know, it's something that happens and it's fine and it's not that big of a deal. And then there's this bargaining that she goes through where she's like, "We've saved thousands of people, so we're in the plus column. It balances out." And then she gets
Yeah.
this, "We're better than other people. The rules shouldn't apply to us." And each confrontation she has with Buffy reveals just another level of her denial and her attempts
Rationalization.
to not care, even though you can see the cracks that she does care. There's a vulnerability there, there's a sadness there, and she just
Yeah.
covers it with this bravado and this, and like dramatic makeup and sexuality. Like all that stuff is part of her mask that she's using to
Mm-hmm.
try to, just not feel bad about what happened.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think when she goes around behind Buffy to Giles, it's a bit of
Oh,
a scene or insight into that struggle that she's going on, because if she didn't really care, then she doesn't care what happens, but she
yeah.
does care. She doesn't want to lose her connection with these people. She also doesn't want to go to jail. She's starting to
Mm-hmm.
have anxieties and fears, and because she's got some guilt, and she's recognizes there's part of her that recognizes this was a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
threatens
Although
Buffy with a sort of "if I go down, you're going down with me"
Mm,
argument
mm.
at one
that's
point.
so
She's like, "You were there
irritating.
too. You were just as much a part of it as I was." which is kind of true. I mean, the scene where the murder actually happens is entirely understandable. There's vampires jumping out at
Yeah.
them from different sides, and they're in a rhythm of taking them down. And then this
Mhm.
human pops up in the place where they expect a vampire. It's a very
Although
understandable accident.
Buffy clocks him and says, Faith, no, as Faith goes in.
Yeah.
So it makes me, and still, like, obviously, when your adrenaline is high, you're in the middle of, you know, you're hyper aware, tactically speaking, about, you know, what's going on around you. It makes sense why she would still go ahead and
Yeah.
stab him.
The momentum
It's
was with it.
the afterwards that's kind of a problem, like Faith going back in, hiding and disposing of the body is
Poorly.
not great. Yeah, people are
And
terrible at that.
and we've also seen several
Well,
times.
he also didn't have the brow and the teeth. He wasn't in vampire mode.
Yeah.
So I would think that you'd be trained as a slayer to, you know, be observant of that kind of
Yeah.
Yeah.
physical, you know, cue.
But
Yeah.
we've seen Faith in fights that she is impulsive and
Yep.
and that she once she starts, like there's been several scenes when she's in a fight where she just starts pummeling on someone and
Yeah.
is not paying attention to the world around her. Like Buffy will be like, "Help, I'm trapped over here." And Faith is just like, "I'm punching someone and it's fun."
Yeah.
She's
Not
not
now, B.
she's not aware. She loses herself in the fighting, which I think is
Well, they made it so there was a question of whether Faith was actually going to come to her aid
with Trick.
with Trick.
Ugh.
Yeah.
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 That was a decision because Faith was done fighting the other vampires and she actually had a moment to think about what she was going to do at that moment because
Yeah.
Trick was the only one left. But
Well, those are the things that give you that complexity. I
Yeah.
mean, that's where she's complicated because there really is a kernel in there of goodness. There is a true slayer inside there, but it doesn't come out often. And that was a moment where it came out.
yeah,
I thought, you know,
and she's hiding it. And this
Yeah.
is where the addiction metaphor comes in as well because I think she's addicted to fighting, to the violence.
Oh, yeah.
And when she's in the middle of a fight, she loses herself in it and stops having the ability to think rationally, whereas Buffy holds on to that at all times. That's why Buffy clocked that was a human, and
Yep.
Faith didn't even hear her say stop because Faith was
Right.
she's in her zone. It's like she's drunk
Yeah.
and she's
Yeah.
just going for it. And she's been able to sort of power her way through her Slayer life for the short amount of time that she's been a Slayer. She's only been a Slayer for, like 4 or 5 months or something. And
Yeah.
up till now, she's just gotten lucky that she hasn't hurt somebody.
Right.
Yeah. Really, truly.
And it was bound to happen eventually with the way that she fights, the way she approaches fights, that she just like jumps in and starts wailing away and doesn't ever take time to survey the scene. She's not a big recon person. She's not a strategy person. She doesn't want to plan. She just wants to jump in and start
Yeah.
beating people up.
Faith would be a terrible cop. That's what I was thinking this entire episode. I was like, this is part of the problem. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's a whole other. But she would just be terrible in that type of situation. That is the last type of personality you want with that type of power
Yeah.
and strength. And, we see the consequences of that in this episode. And
Yep.
it's so painful to watch to a certain extent because you see it coming from a mile away from the introduction of her character and how much she's had to deal with growing up and the instability that she's suffered. And this is kind of that fork in the road moment for her as a human, as a person. Which direction do you want to take? And for right now, we see her going down the wrong path. And it's hard to watch because I don't know, Faith is such a compelling character and she's so three-dimensional and fleshed out that I will never forget watching this one live when it aired, seeing her go and having the realization that she was turning in Buffy to Giles. And I still remember thinking, as 11-year-old me, that Giles believed her and
Yeah.
that
Giles
Buffy
was
was
a very
about to get in
convincing
trouble.
liar.
He's a
Yeah.
great
Yeah,
liar.
absolutely. Yeah, he was.
I was
He
just
was-
like,
That's
damn.
because he's a good actor.
Yeah.
That's true. But
That scene
the
was
fact-
amazing when Buffy
Yeah.
goes in
Very
and she's
well
like
done.
worked up her courage to talk to Giles, and then Faith comes out of the office and she gives Buffy this almost sexy look of like,
Mhm.
I feel very
Like
vindicated,
taunting, kind
victorious
of.
here. Yeah, teasing and
Yeah.
like winky. There's something about
It's
it.
like,
And
I've already told him. It's like,
yeah.
oh, hell.
And then, when Buffy realizes what's going on and that Faith is setting her up, Faith then cannot make eye contact with Buffy. Her eyes are
Mhm.
everywhere except
Yeah.
Buffy in the rest of that scene, and the tension between the three of them is palpable in that
Yeah.
moment. And Giles is so wise, right? He's like,
No.
Faith, you
He
go home. I'll
knows
talk
how
to you in the morning. Buffy,
important-
get in my office. Like,
Yeah.
he's like,
Like,
Yeah.
he knows that Faith has to be all in and believing that Giles believed her side.
Right.
Yeah.
Because otherwise,
Otherwise, she
and
probably would have
he-
killed Giles in that moment,
Yeah,
honestly.
like, he knows that she is kind of a little too far gone at this point to be reasoned with.
One
The
of my
fact that
favorite
she's willing to
lines-
throw Buffy under.
One of my favorite lines from the episode was there because in that sequence, he says, I had to make Faith think I believed her. I don't know how far she will take this. And Buffy says, try far, like all the way far.
Yeah.
Oh, Buffy.
This episode is really light on quippy, fun dialogue.
Yep.
It's a really heavy, dark episode. And
Yeah.
there were just a couple of moments of
Yeah.
lightness,
A lot of
and that was one of them.
Wesley being a little creepy.
Ugh.
Those were some
Wesley.
some
Oh.
levity.
Actually, let's talk about Wesley for a little bit of a break from the Faith talk. And
Yeah.
I want to start it off with this great moment.
Check out Giles, the next generation. What's your deal?
Well, I'm a...
New watcher.
Oh,
Does everybody know about you?
She's a friend.
let's not exaggerate. So, you're the new watcher.
Wesley Wyndham Price.
I like a man with two last names. I'm Cordelia.
And you teach psychology.
I take psychology.
She's a student.
Oh, well, yes. In fact, I am
Oops.
here to watch girls. Buffy and Faith, to be specific.
Well, it's about time we got some fresh blood around here.
Oh, God.
Well, fresh. Yes.
Here we go.
Thanks. So, welcome to Sunnydale.
My. She's cheeky, isn't she?
First word jail, second word bait.
Well, where were we?
Oh my gosh. Oh, Wesley.
It's probably the funniest scene in the episode, and
Yeah.
it's so adorable knowing what I know about Wesley's
Right.
arc in the
Yeah.
future. But I
Right.
remember watching this scene live and being like, he's gross. Like,
Yeah.
you're gross, Wesley. That's
Come on,
disgusting.
man.
And also now part of me is like, well, what do they think is going to happen when they dress Cordelia like she's like a 26-year-old
know.
paralegal all the time?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and Charisma Carpenter herself is older than most of the other cast. And it's so funny. But I love Giles walking behind, kind of like cleaning his glasses and just throwing out, she's a student.
yeah,
Like,
it's so
come on,
funny.
man. Get it together.
And the
My favorite part of that is when Buffy says, "Oh, she's a friend," and she says, "Let's not get
Oh,
carried
yeah.
away."
Oh, gosh.
yeah.
Or let's not exaggerate.
Let's
or
not
whatever.
exaggerate. It's so because
I love
Cordelia
Cordy.
was part of their friend group while she was dating Xander, but she
Right.
never
Mhm.
really liked Buffy ever.
No.
Like
No.
that relationship was one of mutual goals, not one of any kind of
Yeah, she kind of begrudgingly respected her
yeah.
in a way.
But she's
And
never warmed to Buffy, and it's oh god, it's so funny. And I mean, the Wesley thing serves a great purpose in that it'll bring Cordelia back into the inner circle because she wants to be around Wesley, so we don't lose her from the Scooby Gang, and she's such a great voice of truth all the time.
yeah.
But in the
This is
moment,
one of the very first introductions we have of him, right? I mean, this season is when
This
he
is
joined,
the
but
first, yeah.
yeah.
last episode was the
Last
first time we met
episode.
him, and then this is when he and Cordelia meet, and
What an evolution
it makes
that
him
guy
look
goes through.
horrible, right? We already don't have a lot
I'm
of
here
respect for
to
him.
watch girls. I was like, all right, man.
Yeah, like oh
Think it through.
yeah. It also
But-
makes me wonder, like, what does the greater community of Sunnydale High School think Wesley's doing there?
Right.
Like,
He's
is
just this
he?
backup librarian.
Yeah, is
Like,
the
is
story
that-
that he's a librarian, or is he just meant
Well,
to
I
be like?
I don't think he works at the school. I
Just
think he
another
he
adult
just
man
shows up.
hanging
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, like, oh,
Library.
let's let some unknown adult man hang out at the high school around all these girls all the time. It wouldn't it wouldn't fly in a real high school, I hope.
No.
Even though he's British and wearing a suit, which I think helps you get past a lot of gatekeepers. Like, people just
Probably
assume like
true.
a clean-cut suited man is like not a threat. But the scene serves the purpose of removing the like last bit of respect any of us might have had for Wesley after last episode, when he was such a coward in the face of actual danger and like tried to sell out the team immediately to save his own skin and all that stuff. There was maybe the tiniest shred of respect for him left, and he's right that they should investigate the murder of Alan Finch, but his behavior to Cordelia in that scene is like, okay, there's nothing in there that's real. He's just a putz. And
little guy.
And everyone's amusement about it is just delightful. Like, even Faith is like, that's hilarious.
Jailbait, which is a creepy phrase, really.
Yeah.
But again, coming back to when I was saying about the reason I was drawn to this show, the story arc I didn't realize you guys are careful about spoilers, so I won't.
Oh yeah, sorry, I should have warned you that.
Yeah,
but
sometimes we let things slip a little more than
okay.
others, which is not.
We're not
Wesley's
perfect.
character growth over this show and over the Angel show is just incredible.
Yeah, it's
when
staggering.
you take all of these characters, I think of Spike, you know what I mean? Even Angel, the evolution, Cordelia. It was fun to stay with this show because people evolved, characters evolved. They went from being bad to being not so bad to being good to being evil again to, there was always this evolution
and they learn
maturity.
from the things that happen on the show.
Yes.
Don't
Excellent
just
point.
disappear. Like a lot of TV shows, in order, especially back then when before streaming, before you could rewatch things as much as you wanted to, the show most shows were structured and the characters were written kind of statically so that you would always recognize them. Think about like cartoons where they don't even change clothes, right? They're always in the exact same outfit.
And that's what people were drawn to. And people were drawn to that. They wanted to turn on their show and get their character who they liked and who they wanted to see, and they would get the same thing every time. And that was, I don't know, made people feel secure. I don't know. But
well, I just think of.
But it made this show really stand out because the characters really grow and change over time.
Yes. Yep. And your like for them changes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
The range of emotions that I felt watching, the whole entire series towards Faith, for sure. Angel, Spike, like even Giles at times, like everyone is flawed. I don't think there's anyone that's kind of
Think of Anya.
Pollyanna.
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
gosh, I
Anya.
love
Anya's arc
Anya's
is
development.
unbelievable. That arc is
Yep.
unbelievable, especially
Yep.
the way it ends. Oh my gosh.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, just total 360 degrees.
Lance, everything, like it's so rich, and they pay such attention, like you guys are talking about, to the continuity, and having characters remember past things that would seriously affect them. There are references in season 7 to stuff that happens during seasons 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Like they keep it going in a way that gives everything such a lived in feel. And this writing in season 3 to set up Faith's storyline and what happens in the future, I think is some of the best writing we've seen on television, period.
Amen.
The way that they tie it all together.
Yeah.
And I don't think it gets enough credit.
I think that Faith, and we talked about this last week, and Kirk talked about it a little bit, is that she's the dark mirror image of Buffy.
Right.
And I don't think that had been done as well before this. And now I see it, and we talked about this too, but on The Walking Dead with Rick and Shane, it played out again in very similar way. And I think it's a powerful structure for a story to give a character their dark half to bond with and fight with and love and hate. And it's a rich trope, even though it's become kind of a trope. This is one of the first times at least I ever saw it. And I remember at the time, I just could not get enough of the Faith storyline. I was like, what is Faith going to do this week? Like, and if there's an episode that she's not really in, like how she wasn't really in Helpless, I was like, where's my Faith? I need my Faith. Like, I want her to be in every episode.
Especially
The same
watching
way
week to week.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, damn.
There's a whole week without Faith in it? Oh, man. Yeah, it's the same way I feel about Spike. I want Spike to be in every single episode because he's so interesting.
Amen.
And fun. Also, there's a part of me that just loves that Faith is from Massachusetts and that she's got like just a little bit of a Massachusetts accent, and every now and then she says something very New Englandy. That just makes me feel warm and like I'm a part of the story in some weird way.
You know what else is interesting too is that it's so important to the show that all of the surrounding characters grow and change and are affected, like we're talking about, because Buffy can't really do that. They experimented, I think, in season 6 with it, but I don't know whether they were. I don't know if they were as successful as they'd hoped they'd be with that, but she had to be the true blue superhero. She had to be the Captain America. She had to be the always do the right thing character. So you needed to have all of the character development and growth and emotion and connection going on with all the surrounding characters.
Yeah, she does grow and change, but you're right, not as much as, say, Willow, right? Like because she is always at heart the Slayer, and most of her major growth happens in these first couple of seasons when she's coming to terms with her fate and being the Slayer. And honestly, her relationship with Faith really solidifies who she is. Having to face
that's a good point.
Her dark half, I think, is sort of one of the biggest turning points in Buffy's growth as a human. First, it was having to sacrifice Angel, and then facing this darkness that could be inside her if she wasn't diligent about keeping it back. Is the other big turning point in her character. And then the future seasons with Buffy are just sort of polishing the edges of those major developments. And you're right, the other characters get to have a lot more growth.
Well, and they show her growth through their growth. You know what I mean? To your point.
The relationships change and grow and contract and morph over time. Her relationships with each of them. It's the
Yeah.
burden of a central character in any
Yeah.
series is that
Yeah.
they can't be as interesting as the side characters because they have to carry the continuity and carry the plot, and there has to be some steadiness to them. And that's why a lot of actors say they prefer to play, characters because they get to be a villain or to be more flawed or to be more, to go through more change. Side characters just have more freedom.
And because of the powerful relationships that she has with everybody in this cast, you do get chances to see her dealing with issues and growing. It's smaller. Like for instance, with Willow in this episode, I thought I mean, every scene with Buffy and Willow was always fantastic. They just had this chemistry, I think, and it just worked out really, really well. But you know, they just they always end up coming back together.
Yeah.
She helps ground Buffy. Which is why it's always so painful in season 6 when she struggles. But yeah, I think I agree with you everything you said there. I think that she's got to be the central figure, but through her relationships with these people that she cares so much about, we get development in her. But it's different.
The scenes with Willow are really interesting. So in the first scene, they're just awkward and Willow bails almost immediately. Buffy's like, "Hi," and Willow's like, "Yeah, I gotta go."
Well,
And
the pain, you can see
yeah,
the pain.
there's so much awkwardness and unspoken things. And Willow then names it later when she says, "I've been letting things fester." And
Yeah.
that
The
moment,
great
right,
line.
where
I loved it.
Yeah.
Willow often has the best lines. Where Willow just unloads all of the things she's thinking, and then Buffy starts crying, and then Buffy unloads to Willow, and Willow switches to support mode so quickly and
Mhm.
Yeah.
is so understanding and non-judgmental. It's a beautiful model of a female friendship where we hardly ever see them competitive with each other. And
Yeah.
when they are, it's either played as a joke. There's a moment in season 5 where Buffy does well on a paper and Willow's like, "I'm academically jealous of you. Congratulations."
I love that.
But it's at the time there weren't a lot of female friendships on TV that weren't like romantically competing or where
Mm.
the best friend was either like so weak compared to the main character that they were no
Yeah.
competition or they were like rivals. And
Yeah.
this is a real friendship that really speaks to me based on like my
Mm.
own friendships that I've had over the
Mhm.
years with
Yeah.
women that can have ups and downs and complications and misunderstandings, but at the end love will get through all those things.
Yeah.
And the love between the two of them is, again, I'm using the same word, palpable.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, they have such respect for each other. I
Yeah.
think at the center of everything, and they each see the other's strengths and admire them. And there's no ounce of, like you said, like the competition isn't there. They aren't competing over male attention or anything like that. They just both see each other for who they are and care about the other one. And that is so rare, not just in female friendships, in general portrayed in the media, but for teenage female
Mm.
friendships,
Mm. Good point.
especially. And Willow just, she breaks my heart in this
Willow was
episode.
always for me the kind of ideal friend, the kind of
Yeah.
person you would want to have as a friend, because
She's
she's funny and
empathetic.
lighthearted, but at the same time could be very serious if needed be. She's also very
Oh yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Willow is always so honest. She calls it like it is, and she's the one that will come up to you and say, "You know what? You're being a bit of a dick here." You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I'm not taking sides. I just want you to know, this is how you're coming off, and
Yeah.
you need that, and from a good friend. And
She's not intimidated by Buffy and who she is.
That's
mm-mm,
true.
That's for sure.
That is very
mm-mm,
true.
yeah,
And Willow has her own issues, but they're not really Buffy's Buffy related, and so their
Yeah.
friendship is able to be this source of strength for both of them. We talked about
Right.
this a little bit in season 2 in the Halloween episode when Buffy wants to make Willow look sexy
Yeah.
and put on a costume that doesn't hide her, and there's not a moment where Buffy is at all worried that Willow is going to outshine her. That's not, it
Yeah.
doesn't cross her mind. She just wants
Right.
Willow to blossom and be the best Willow she can be, and it's a beautiful moment. And the when Willow, you know, lets Buffy unload on her in this scene and then says, like, you have to go to Giles, it's another beautiful moment of friendship where all the other concerns are put aside and Willow is focused on what Buffy needs in that moment and is so
Yeah.
understanding and, like I said, non-judgmental.
Yeah, and Willow of probably of everyone has the most empathy.
Yeah.
She's the character with the most ability to provide empathy for her friends and for people around her. You know, and like she's all upset because she feels like maybe she's done something wrong and that Buffy's mad at her. But the minute Buffy breaks down, she realizes this isn't about her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then she's able to have complete empathy for her and listen to her and advise her, and just wonderful.
We should all have a Willow in our lives.
Well,
Yeah.
it's such a shame that Faith doesn't get to experience that. You know, like, because it could have worked out where she was, you know, kind of brought in somewhat seamlessly. And she needs a Willow.
And she doesn't
desperately.
have one.
No.
Well, she needs an angel first.
Yeah,
That's
she's
true.
not ready
to
for
get
a Willow.
to a Willow.
No, yeah, she's got to get through the addiction problems.
It's
I
interesting.
got a question.
Oh,
for
okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to contrast Willow to Xander because Xander immediately makes the Faith dilemma about himself. He inserts himself into it immediately,
Right.
and then they're like, don't go there, and he goes there anyway. Because he wants so badly to be at the center of everything that he can't listen to reason.
Yeah.
Well, and I do have a little bit of sympathy for him here. Like, it's made pretty clear in the last episode that he had never slept with anyone before Faith. And, you know, we saw in the Zeppo how sometimes you just feel so useless in that group of friends. And he seems to think like, oh, finally, like, I have a connection with Faith. I can be helpful.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, immediately as soon as he says it, that it's not gonna go the way he thinks it is. And I feel so bad for him when he goes over there every time, and you kind of see the realization in his eyes and the fear when she starts choking him and not letting go.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, never
I've made
mind.
a terrible
This is not it.
mistake.
Yeah.
This is not at all what I thought it was.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know, it was crushing.
Boy.
To some, you know, no pun intended. I have a question.
Yep.
And I apologize. I did not watch a bunch of episodes prior or after. So, but, and my memory is not what it used to be. So why was Willow so destroyed by Xander's admission of sleeping with Faith? Because I thought at this point, isn't she with Oz? Or
Yeah, she is. But
I think it's three-pronged and kind of complicated.
Yeah.
Well, we got time. Let's go.
Yeah. I mean, we know so. And Penny, jump in when you feel like it. But we know obviously that she has had this long-standing friendship and crush on Xander. They've known each other since they were children. She was in love with him. It was very complicated. She had to see him, you know, kind of obsess over Buffy when Buffy came there, and then she sees him get with Cordelia, and he finally gives her the attention that, you know, she had been starving for and the affection she had been starving for. And now she's already dealing, so one aspect of it, she is already dealing with the fact that she feels that Faith is kind of taking Buffy away from her a little bit. And Buffy and Xander are her two best friends. And once she finds out that Xander has connected with Faith, I would assume that plays into it, that worry that Faith is now going to draw, you know, Xander away from her. And then on top of that, she has just basically recommitted and gone all in on her relationship with Oz. And I'm assuming that she still has feelings for Xander. She had such strong ones. I'm sure they're not magically gone. And realizing that she now has to think about him sleeping with someone else. And I also assume that she imagined losing her virginity with Xander over the years plenty of times. And that may have been something that she thought was going to happen. And, she's struggling with that
Wasn't that something that
realization.
they flirted with in earlier seasons?
I mean,
They fool around, she and
yeah,
Xander, but it's just kissing. I think, Kara, that you're right, that she probably has imagined many times not just losing her virginity to Xander, but them losing their virginities together.
Together,
Yeah.
I think especially teenagers put a ton of meaning on that doesn't really need to be there.
Yeah.
And I think also it was like the last nail in the coffin of her feelings for Xander, her crush on him. It was like the final realization that it's not ever going to happen. Like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That is, she's saying goodbye to that part of her feelings and relationship with him. I don't think she would ever have cheated on Oz again after everything that happened and he took her back. But
Yeah.
when you have feelings that strong for someone and for that long, they don't just go
complicated.
away.
Yeah.
And
Even if you're
you can
making the active
choose.
choice.
Yeah. It's interesting that Oz is not in this episode.
Yeah.
Because it gives us the space to remember that
Right.
Willow and
No, that's a
Xander
good point.
have this history and without the complication of Oz sitting right there. And I think she also is crying just from the stress of the whole thing, right? The seriousness of it. When you have a big intense conversation like the four of them have, and a big realization that Xander slept with Faith and all this stuff is difficult and heavy and dark. I think it was just too much. It's too overwhelming, and she sort of quietly goes in the bathroom to cry because she doesn't want anyone else to see her fall apart. But I mean, I've certainly done that. Just because things get to be too much, and crying is a great way to release that overwhelmed feeling.
Yep.
But I love that they included that reaction in this episode because I think it's so realistic that Willow would feel that way. And it's complicated, and you see it dawn on her way before it dawns on Buffy or Giles.
Yeah.
She immediately gets it. And Allison Hannigan, I don't know what it is, but maybe it's like a lip quiver or something that she does. But whenever she looks upset, it just makes me feel it so much more than some other actors. I'm just like, don't hurt Willow like that.
Yeah.
We don't need
I
to see that face.
remember in one of the DVD commentaries, one of the writers is talking about Willow and Allison Hannigan and her ability to look vulnerable and hurt. And they're like, yeah, whenever we're in doubt, we just put Willow in danger, and we know that our audience is going to have strong emotions about that.
It's true. That
Because
is true.
I
she's
think
so
it's
lovable.
also that what we were talking about earlier is that her character is so loyal and honest and truthful and filled with empathy for her friends and is always leaned on by everybody, and she's there for them. So, to see her in pain is really even more dramatic. It's more powerful. It's more hurtful. You know what I mean?
She's like the heart of the group. She's
exactly.
And she's very raw. Her emotions are usually right under the surface and accessible. Buffy has to keep some of her emotions more tamped down as the Slayer. Although we've talked about a lot about how Sarah Michelle Gellar is great at performing vulnerability and softening that face. I think Xander is a typical teenage boy in that he hides a lot of his emotions, and has a lot of bluster and silliness that he uses to cover them up. And so
Yeah.
Willow really is this raw beating heart that allows the audience to go through a lot of emotions as well. Like we identify with her. At
Yeah.
least I do.
Well, and it's not like, Xander didn't really have a fair chance, from what it sounds like, growing up in his household. Whereas Willow, who had, a psychologist, or is she a psychiatrist? It's Dr. Rosenberg, right? Her mom,
Yeah.
who constantly was trying to psychoanalyze Willow and discuss emotions and all sorts of stuff, which it seems like had the opposite effect that her mom intended of them bonding. But at the same time, Willow is incredibly emotionally intelligent. And Xander's not quite there yet. But I think she sees things clearer than anybody else. She's incredibly observant and in tune with everybody's emotions and motivations behind their actions. And she feels things deeper than everybody else.
Yeah. And she's so smart that she just processes information so quickly. So when Xander's like, well, we kind of connected.
Yeah.
Like Willow's brain goes click, 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 got it. And being ahead of everybody else all the time like that must be
exhausting,
frustrating sometimes to be like, come on, catch up. Like,
Right.
I already got there. Let's go. It's
poor Xander.
It's one of the reasons why she sort of hero worships Giles. It's like finally another person who understands books and is smart and thinks quickly. It makes her happy when she meets him and gets to be close with him. He sort of takes the place of a father for all of the Scoobies.
Yeah, you're right. He does.
And I guess Xander is his most disappointing
Yeah,
child.
it's like he just can't handle Xander.
No, he can't.
So funny.
There aren't many that could. It took a demon to be able to handle him.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
Oh,
Xander. We love you and we hate you, Xander. You're very problematic, but you're also adorable and funny, so we forgive a lot. So when Xander goes to talk to Faith at her motel room, it's such a cringy scene because we all know from many conversations with Faith that she just doesn't think of having sex with someone as a connection. To her, it'd be the same as like playing a game of tennis. Like, thanks for a good workout. You know, like it.
Right.
And
like she has a craving for a sandwich or a meatball sub. You eat the meatball sub, you're done. It's out of your mind.
Well, she's scared. She's scared of connection.
Oh, absolutely.
She's terrified of connection because of the potential to lose that and get hurt.
The pain from it.
Yeah.
And she uses sex as a mask. She uses sex as another numbing agent, like she uses violence. And even though Buffy tries to explain that to Xander, he can't conceive that what was so meaningful to him was not meaningful to her in some way. And he just puts his head in the noose. He's just like,
yeah, but that's understandable.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
it's
why I feel
like
bad for him.
Yeah, he was so naive and young and immature and inexperienced and so blind going into it.
It's the scene is so painful because the audience knows that Faith is in a bad place and that she is violent, and Xander goes over there because he just can't help himself and thinks he knows better than everybody else who's told him not to do it. And then, she turns on him pretty quickly and it gets ugly pretty quickly, and
it's disturbing.
The look on his face is sort of equally terrified of imminent death and also just like the sad realization that having sex meant nothing to her.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I don't know how you guys felt watching it either the first time or again, but I have no problem believing that if Angel hadn't interrupted, Faith would have killed him in that moment.
Or
like whether
seriously hurt him.
Yeah, like either, I don't think she intended to necessarily kill him, like she was probably, at least what I would assume, is she was getting as close as she thought she could without actually killing him, like toying with the idea of feeling that power and having his life in her hands.
Yeah.
But that Slayer strength, that's kind of hard to
Yeah.
Well, he also, I think,
wrangle.
had become symbolic for her in that moment of all of this guilt and disgust and anger at herself that is being reflected at her from the Scooby Gang. You know what I mean?
Yeah. She's judging herself the way she believes they're judging her.
right.
And yeah, Xander represents the whole Scooby Gang at that point. And so she's
Right.
like, you don't want me anymore. I can tell. You don't
Yeah.
actually care about me. And she loses herself in the violence of the moment. Kara, you're right. She might have killed him because we've seen her. She gets
Scary.
lost in the moment and she just goes through with things without a lot of thought. It would have been very easy for her to kill him.
Also, to Angel's point, she doesn't want to see that side of her.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they're making her see that side of her. And and she wants to punish them for that, you know?
I think it's interesting too, kind of fits in with how Faith is seeing herself right now. One thing that I think is very distinct between her and Buffy in this episode and how they deal with her killing Alan is that Buffy kind of truly experiences the guilt and she feels that responsibility for what happened, whereas Faith goes into almost like a shame spiral, which is a bit more dangerous and is more about the judgment that she probably feels from others, judgment on herself, being like, well, am I exactly who they said I was? Whereas the responsibility aspect is gone from it. And she becomes almost defiant because of that shame and trying to rationalize and overcome it. Whereas Buffy is pure guilt. She's just like, we were responsible for this. We need to do the right thing. And this is really where they start to diverge in, how they take responsibility and what they value going forward. And I
call this the Spider-Man episode.
Yeah.
Because with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
Like it.
And
it's kind of X-Men-ish too. Like seeing as where Faith starts talking about, we basically have superpowers. We are better than everyone else.
Yeah, she's
and
kind
Buffy's
of Magneto.
like, no, we have, it's like,
right.
Well, we have responsibility.
I missed the mark last night, and I'm sorry about the guy. I really am. But it happens. Anyways, how many people do you think we've saved by now? Thousands? And didn't you stop the world from ending? Because in my book, that puts you and me in the plus column.
We help people. It doesn't mean we can do whatever we want.
Why not? The guy I off was no Gandhi. I mean, we just saw he was mixed up in dirty dealings.
Maybe. But what if he was coming to us for help?
What if he was? You're still not seeing the big picture, B. Something made us different. We're warriors. We were built to kill.
To kill demons. But it does not mean that we get to pass judgment on people like we're better than everybody else.
We are better. That's right. Better. People need us to survive. In the balance, nobody's gonna cry over some random bystander who got caught in the crossfire.
I am.
That's your loss.
It's almost like the stages of grief that Faith is going through, and this is the bargaining stage where she's justifying her own actions and she's taking that argument to its logical conclusion, which is we're kind of better than everyone else. We can judge other people. Rules shouldn't apply to us because we have these abilities and these powers.
It's also a very narcissistic kind of sociopathic kind of approach or mentality.
Yeah. She's in a shame spiral and she's grasping at straws for what will make her feel better. She desperately wants to convince Buffy at the early stages of this episode because she wants someone else to say, yeah, you're right. Like, this is what happens. And, what you did was okay. and she's not going to get that from Buffy. And then, of course, she turns to anger after that. Like, once she can't convince Buffy to side with her, she's angry.
Interesting. That's a good point, because it brings me back to when Giles does that for Buffy.
Yeah.
Because he says, listen, this is not the first time this has happened. This, given what you're doing, these accidents happen. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
You have to deal with them. We have to deal with them. There'll be an investigation. We have to go through the process. But, yeah,
and it makes sense that the Watchers Council would have dealt with this before. Of course they've dealt with it before.
Sure, of course.
I think when Xander went over to Faith's hotel room and she said, well, go talk to Buffy. She's the one that accidentally murdered someone. If Xander had said, yeah, but Willow's with Buffy and I thought you could use a friend. If he had just sort of gone along with her version of the story, I don't think she would have turned on him the way she did. I think she would have been so grateful to have somebody on her side, believing her version of the story. I read this interesting article recently, was written by a therapist, about that shame is the hardest emotion to help people get out of. That
makes sense.
That shame sticks to your psyche in a way that other negative emotions don't as powerfully. Fear is another one. Fear is deep, right? It's your brain saves fearful memories in the brain stem so that they're they become part of your instinctive reactions to the world. But shame colors everything, and it prevents healing and it prevents moving forward.
Do you think shame is why Buffy didn't bring up the Ted incident?
I have no good explanation for why the Ted incident doesn't come up.
Because Buffy, I'm assuming, all of these things that she's thinking that Faith should be feeling or is going through would be based on things she felt when she was convinced she killed Ted and questioned by detectives. And it's the same detective that questioned her about Ted, and
he didn't bring up
Kendra.
Ted. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kendra.
So I'm like, how does this not come up at all? And if Buffy
the police
is
of
wanting
Sunnydale
to
are
reach
deeply
Faith,
stupid.
That's true.
Yeah.
They really are. But if Buffy is wanting to connect with Faith, why not say, look, I thought I killed my mom's boyfriend for a period of time. Like, I get what you're going through.
I really don't understand why no one brings up Ted. Like, there's a point when Giles would say, like, listen, you thought this was happening to you last year, remember? And we talked about it. Like, it's so weird that it doesn't come up. The fact that, eventually Ted is revealed to be a psychopathic robot murderer, serial killer, doesn't change that 24 hours where Buffy thought she had killed him and where her guilt was, unreal. She whipped out the overalls of sadness and, and
Buffy was kind of waiting for that confrontation too. Like that, I mean, yes, technically, like, he struck her and it was a self-defense situation, but she was amped, ready for him.
Yeah, she hated
confront
him.
her. Yeah.
And I think she even says, oh, I was so hoping you would do that.
Yes. So it's like, Buffy, can you not think that would reach... Anyway, I don't know.
And
that
we
it
have
really
seen
doesn't
her
make sense
learn
to
from
me.
it. Like, there's definitely a moment when she wants to hit Quentin Travers and she's like, I can't. I'm the Slayer. I'll kill him. Like, she's aware of her own power in a way. Quentin Travers deserves to be hit. He's such a slime. Speaking of the council, let's go back to Wesley and calling in the troops to take Faith to England, and the whole scene where she's gonna pop that one guy's head like a grape and manages to escape it's another moment of a little bit of comic relief because it's just so fun to see Wesley handed his hat
like what did you think was gonna happen, man? Like, this,
you're an idiot. Like, you're
over your head.
Yeah, you're in so over your head. And like, did you not learn that last week when you couldn't face up against Balthazar and his vampire minions? Like, what you're doing when he's skulking around outside Giles's office, eavesdropping on Giles and Buffy talking about how they're not going to tell anyone else.
Yeah.
I honestly think he calls the council and gets them involved out of equal parts obedience to the council's policies and jealousy over Giles's relationship with Buffy.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
feeling left
He's
out.
throwing
It's
a little
petty.
tantrum.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's really petty. And
He's very petty.
And the council was wholly unprepared. Only one dude in that truck with Faith? Come on.
That is a terrible idea. I do not understand their thinking. This has been, centuries. It goes back centuries, the council's relationship with Slayers. They know how powerful they are.
Yeah.
This cannot be the first time. We know it's not the first time that a Slayer has accidentally killed a human or killed a human in general. You would think they would have some sort of protocol, like 3 grown men to 1 Slayer at least.
And tranquilizers.
Yeah.
Amen.
We know they have those.
That's
They have
all. That's
plenty
what it
of
was going to take.
access.
Yeah.
That was the only thing that was going to stop her.
Yeah, like you have to completely incapacitate a Slayer because they are powerful and resourceful and creative.
I think maybe perhaps the implication was that Faith is unlike any other Slayer.
Yeah.
And that Slayers feel a responsibility. They have a role and they understand it, and they, like Buffy, would feel guilty about this and want it resolved and want to deal with it, and that's just not the Slayer that Faith is.
Yeah, and respect the authority of the council, right?
Right, exactly. She doesn't respect any authority except her own.
None. Yeah.
And even though Buffy doesn't necessarily respect the council's authority over her in general, I think she would submit to it if this were her in that situation.
Yeah.
She would understand that she'd done something wrong and there needed to be some sort of consequence. But Faith just, God.
She's like a wild animal, right? She's
Hadn't she broken with the council at this point?
No. Buffy hasn't broken with the council, and Faith, the closest.
What was the episode? Was it before this or after this, where she has to do the trials?
That's before this.
Oh yeah, that's 2 before this, I think. Helpless
but
is 13.
or 3 before it. Yeah, and but she, at this point, she's still subject to the council's authority. She sort of begrudgingly lets Wesley be her new watcher, even though she still looks to Giles. She's not like outwardly just completely rejecting Wesley's authority.
She does reject him eventually, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
sending Wesley there
doesn't go. Sending Wesley there is hilarious.
Charge over both of them.
I love to think about the scene where Quentin
can't watch over himself.
Quentin has returned from Sunnydale to England, right after the events of Helpless. He's met Buffy. He's seen that she has this relationship with Giles. He's seen that she's defiant and creative and all these other things. And then he goes back to the Watchers Council and he's like, I know who we'll send to Sunnydale. Wesley. Like, how did that choice happen? Like, what was that meeting where he was
it's
like,
a punishment? That must be it.
Very corporate decision.
Yeah.
It's like, you get to go deal with this mess.
Yeah. It's like, they could have at least sent somebody, maybe a woman would have had a better chance, like bonding with Faith. Although after the Gwendolyn Post thing, who knows? I don't know if anyone could have really bonded with Faith at that point. She may have been a lost cause all along. Like the murder was just the thing that triggered her spiral, but something was bound to happen because she was behaving so recklessly and she has all this firepower. It's like giving a traumatized teenager a machine gun and expecting them not to eventually kill someone with it. Like, she has all this power. And, like a regular traumatized teen who doesn't have a lot of power, what's the worst that they can do? Like, if they don't have access to a gun or something like that, they maybe get into car accidents. Maybe they do shoplifting. Maybe they get into fist fights. But these are all containable traumas and tragedies. But somebody with the firepower of a Slayer, it's just this epic level of danger. That's so much scarier than your run-of-the-mill traumatized teenager.
And they do a good job with that in her character later in the Angel series.
Yeah.
And with Wesley. I mean, the arc the two of them have is pretty intense.
Yeah, I'm excited to
Don't
get
wanna
to those
spoil.
episodes and
Oh,
Me
fantastic.
next
too.
That's
season.
fantastic stuff.
I've been having to stop myself, really, like, truly stop myself from watching ahead this time.
Yeah. It's
Don't
it's
do it.
so hard. The only thing that is making it easier for me to not watch ahead on Buffy and Angel is my current obsession with the show Shōgun, and
That
how
is helpful.
whenever I have a down moment, I'm like, well, I could watch Shōgun again. Like, I'm just
I've
See,
heard a
I've done
lot of
the
good things about that.
opposite.
it's
I've
so
been watching.
beautifully created. Yeah.
Mm.
I need to give that a chance. I've been so like burnout at work. I've been watching utterly mindless television. So I should
Yeah.
dive back into something that is actually somewhat stimulating
Yeah,
and not
Shōgun is
Vanderpump
meaty.
Rules.
Yeah. I recommend Shōgun. I recommend you watch it when you have the time to dedicate to it and put your phone away. There's a lot of subtitles, so you're not going to want to be distracted because you'll miss a
That's
lot.
why I love subtitles, because it forces me to pay attention.
Yeah.
Good old ADHD.
It's a very I think people who like Buffy would like Shōgun. There's a lot of, first of all, badass women. There are some badass women in that series. Even though the culture of feudal Japan is quite oppressive and women are viewed as property,
Fascinating, though.
the women in the story manage to, within the roles that are given to them by that society, are able to wield power in creative ways, soft power, and I find that really interesting. There's also great fight scenes. Like the
Nice.
samurai style of warfare is beautiful to watch.
Right.
Almost like
And
a dance.
yeah, it's anyway. This is not a Shōgun
No.
podcast, but I love it and I'm obsessed with it. And
Big
there's only
plug.
2 episodes left, and I'm like, what am I gonna do after that?
That's on Hulu, right?
Yeah, Hulu.
Okay.
And I'm
Oh.
listening to not 1, not 2, but 4 different podcasts about it as well.
Nice.
Oh my gosh.
I'm obsessed.
Oh,
Obsessed.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, it's one of the only shows Podcastica's not covering too. So it's like I had to go outside the Podcastica network
Yeah.
to listen to some other podcasts. So
I'm surprised. I would think a show like that would have a cast.
I
on
think
Podcastica.
that they're just it fell at a time when people weren't
Yeah.
like there wasn't availability, and the fact that it's only going to be 1 season, like it just didn't.
It's tricky.
There has been some chatter about doing a 1 podcast episode wrap up of the whole series at the end.
Yeah.
I know Jonathan of Star Wars Cast is also a huge Shōgun fan, and we might do something, but it hasn't coalesced.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Oh.
on back to Buffy.
Yeah. We should pour one out for Mr. Trick. Gone too
Yeah.
soon.
Let's
I
talk
really
about
enjoyed
that.
him as a character.
He had a great
Yeah,
death
he was
moment
good.
though. When
did.
Yeah, he did.
when he's like, "Oh no, this isn't good at all."
It's
Like,
not. Yep. Like,
he also
Well, that
made a
was
kind
nice.
of crass joke when he says, I heard once you taste Slayer blood, you never want to go back. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Ugh.
that's a black joke. That's a
Icky.
that's a penis joke.
Yeah.
This metaphor.
Yeah. I love Mr. Trick. I'm so sad that he got killed in this episode because I've always been a huge fan of that character. I think he's hilarious. And I think he brought a quality to the universe, the Buffy universe, that nobody else really has. This, like, the way that he's sort of pecuniary, the way he is, he's like a deal maker. He's like
He's so
Right.
sly.
wheeling and dealing, he's like, oh, I got a guy for that. And he brings in Ethan Rain, and it just,
That's the thing.
he's so
It-
fun.
It would have been so much fun to see the dynamic more between him and Faith and the mayor.
Like, yeah, both
Because-
working for the mayor. Yeah.
and like
Right.
kind of competing for his favor or anything like that, and trying to one up each other. Like, that would have been fun to see.
It really would
I
have
feel
been.
like they would have had some good chemistry in that sense.
And like,
But-
thinking really fantastically. Like if Trick had lived into future seasons, like seeing him and Spike in the same scenes, like
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that would have
that would
been
have just
great.
That would
been
have been fun.
fire.
Yeah, that would have been great.
But I guess
Um,
they have to kind of make way for a new
new-
secondary villain for the most part.
yeah,
Getting rid of
and
him and
they needed to, push Faith and the mayor together, and
yeah.
that is also a really
Oh.
fantastic scene. I'm gonna play the clip.
You sent your boy to kill me.
That's right, I did.
He's dust.
I thought he might be, what with you standing here and all.
I guess that means you have a job opening.
And that's how the episode ends. It's such a great cliffhanger because you're
It
like,
really is.
meanwhile, Buffy and Giles are having this conversation where they're like, maybe there's a way we can save Faith. She came back to town with you. There's hope. And it's like, yeah, no, Faith has a whole other thing in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the mayor, the look on his face when he sees her, I have to remember that he has just become invincible. So he's not afraid
Uh-huh.
of the Slayer, right? He's like, oh, she can't kill me. This is
Yeah.
interesting. And when she says, you have a job opening, he just opens the door and lets her in, and they sort of have this eye contact moment. And I almost expected him to pull a Rick from Casablanca, like this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah. He
my
knows,
my
like-
evil peanut butter, your rogue chocolate, like two great tastes that go great together. It's one of my favorite moments in the whole Buffyverse because I didn't see it coming.
No, that was not what I thought was going to happen at all. That's what made it so brilliant.
It's delicious.
They played that perfectly.
Yeah. And the chemistry between them is immediate.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, we're going to get to that in the future. There's going to be lots of really great Faith and the Mayor stuff to talk about.
Yeah, I think the mayor is probably one of my most favorite villains of the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's his, he's so sadistic and sociopathic and manipulative and evil and in ways that, but yet his fact that he's just normal.
Yeah.
He's just a normal person makes it even more scary.
Yeah.
He's not like a demon. He's not a vampire. He's not a two-dimensional, character.
Yeah. He dresses and talks like somebody's like dopey uncle. And he's cheerful all the time. He's always like cracking dumb jokes and
right.
It reminds me of so I'm at, for those that don't know, I'm staying at my parents' house right now in Houston, and my dad loves watching like Leave It to Beaver and Andy Griffith.
Oh God.
And that type of voice and like cheerfulness on those shows I see in the mayor. And he even gets like, he's kind of traditional, a little old-fashioned, and he'll make comments we'll see in the future that
well, because he's
show
150
that he's a little
years old.
He's still more reserved. And so now whenever I watch, my dad has those on, I'm just like, oh, it's like the mayor.
Is one of them secretly trying to become a demon? What's going on with that?
Right?
Like,
Ward Cleaver could totally be a demon. Don't you worry. Or June.
I would watch
or robots.
I would watch a Buffy Leave It to Beaver crossover show in a heartbeat.
That would be amazing. Kind of like Pleasantville.
Yeah.
But with vampires.
Exactly.
Sold.
Like let's have June and Ward get turned into vampires and see what kind of chaos ensues. That'd be really fun. I would not want to see Andy Griffith turned into a vampire though.
No, that'd probably be bad. Or Barney Fife. That would not be good either.
That would be sad.
They
or
would
little
bungle
Opie.
that.
No.
I want to go back just a second to the Trick character. And I think if I had one large criticism of the series of Buffy as a show in general, is that it did a very poor job of diversifying its characters
It
and adding
definitely did.
adding any ethnic perspective. and then they just layered on even worse with that, with, like in that character, first of all, his name being Trick is kind of sus.
Yeah.
And then in his death scene, he makes a racist joke
Yep.
Yeah.
essentially about himself, which is it's terrible. She refers to him when she says, she doesn't say you sent your man to kill me. She says you sent your boy to kill me.
Oh yeah, that was cringy.
There's just this cringy
It didn't age well.
uncomfortableness. No, and the only other black character, correct me if I'm wrong, is Kendra, right?
Who was a bit of a caricature in terms of
who was very two-dimensional with the Jamaican
horrible
accent.
Yeah, the accent.
And then they end up killing her. So,
it was awful.
I think they made some improvements when the Angel show spun off, but that was also different producers. That was, I can't remember the guy who wrote that, but he's famous.
David Greenwalt, maybe? Or Doug Petrie, one of those guys.
Yeah.
They also added more characters of color in college a little bit. I have a sort of silly headcanon that helps me deal with the lack of ethnicity in Sunnydale, Southern California, one of the most diverse areas of the country.
Right.
Is that people of color have a very well-tuned radar for what they call white people nonsense. So I think that
so the hellmouth
that black people or Latino people or whatever, they come to Sunnydale and they're like, oh no, that's some white people nonsense, and they leave.
I buy that.
That's how I justify it in my head when I'm watching, because the more years pass, the more the lack of diversity just like screams out of the TV at me when I'm watching Buffy. I'm like, just like one Latin character, just one. Can we have one? Yeah. Like none. There's just
not really until like season 6, 7. Season 7.
They introduced the principal.
Yeah,
and
we get some backstory on his mother and stuff.
Robin.
Yeah, Robin Wood.
I love him. That's gonna be fun.
What's the name of Riley's friend in season 4? Forrest.
Oh yeah, Forrest. Yeah. That was an interesting route they went with him too.
There's not enough of color or other kinds of diversity on the screen. There's not.
I didn't love what they did with Gunn and Angel either eventually, but that's for another day.
Yeah, that's years from now. My headcanon of like just black people have come to Sunnydale and been like, no, this is not, nope. To quote Jordan Peele, nope. And they're like, we're not living here. This is not happening. You got to be kidding me.
That checks out.
It doesn't really help with the fact of needing representation on TV, but it helps me still love a show that I loved, 25 years ago.
Right.
That reminds me in a really roundabout, weird way that today, the day we're recording this, not the day we're going to release it, is Sarah Michelle Gellar's birthday. So happy birthday to our own SMG. Yeah. Very excited for her. She's
I still can't believe that they have not been able to put together any kind of even a one-off movie or a short limited series, or they just completely
talk about it.
Yeah, I just can't believe it.
I think a lot of that has to do with the bad press around Joss Whedon and his bad behavior over the years, that some of these stars don't want to work with him again. And so the only way...
Well, and he owns some aspects of the license, which is why he was able to go and do the comic books with Dark Horse and continue into a 7th, 8th, 9th, and I think 10th maybe season, maybe more. I'm not sure.
Oh, there's more. There's at least 12.
12 or 13.
But he owns a lot of the rights, and
so he'd have to be involved, or they'd have to buy it out, and
or he'd have to graciously just be like a way in the background executive producer and not have hands on. But I don't know if he's that kind of person, right? He's a prolific creator. And I think
not so much anymore.
I think he's
Yeah.
doing stuff behind the scenes. I think he's still working,
Probably.
and he's just not as public about it because, there's still Buffy content coming out constantly in the comic books.
Yeah, he's doing that. That's true.
And, his
But he did the
brother,
Narrows, or not the Narrows, the Nevers,
the Nevers.
for HBO, and that actually was pretty good. But it was only half of the first season, and then they pulled the plug on it because of all this stuff.
The bad press. His
yeah.
brother is apparently a good person and does a lot of the writing. They seem to have similar writing styles. His brother was the showrunner for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and
Right.
I really
Right. I
loved
remember
Agents
that.
of S.H.I.E.L.D. I thought it
Yeah.
was
Yep.
a great show.
I
But
think there's also, my impression is that he's also not really remorseful about
yeah,
it. He did do a recent interview. Was it Vanity Fair? I'm not sure. He did a big interview, and it was a travesty. He just doubled down on stuff and didn't take any responsibility or remorse, expressed too much remorse. And as a result, I think people were just like, yeah, done with him. You know what I mean?
they don't want to work with him. I know that Sarah Michelle Gellar has said, I'm very proud of Buffy, but I can't wait until my name is no longer linked with that man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, she'll never come back and do a reboot or, a sequel series or anything like that because she just doesn't want to have anything to do with him. I think the same is true of most of the stars, but they are willing to work with each other. That's how that Slayer's audiobook got made.
Right. Right.
It
That was
was without
lovely.
Joss Whedon being involved, and they all seemed to have a great time working on that. And it was some of the original stars: Charisma Carpenter, James Marsters,
They were
Juliet
also going to
Landau.
reboot it, I thought. Wasn't there
Yeah,
like a reboot that was coming?
there was talk of it, and there
They'd
was
talked
fan
about
outcry
it.
of like, don't reboot it, do a sequel series, like do
Yeah.
Star Trek: The Next Generation style, not
Yeah.
there was the same outcry when there was the Charmed reboot that just completely started a whole new story, and everyone's like, why would you do that when you already have this family and you could just build on
Right.
it? There's talk again of a Charmed reboot, but going back to the original family and the original characters, it's always starting. There's always like a fan movement of trying to get it to happen. And I don't think that the appetite for a Buffy sequel series or reboot or movie is going to go away. And it doesn't have to even be in the same time period. Like the Slayer universe is rich. There's tons of material
There's
that could
so
be
much
explored
you
there.
could do.
Well, plus they now, and I think this is the last thing I heard on the reboot idea in the present was going to be one of the not disciples. What were they called?
The Potentials?
The Potentials,
Oh,
right.
yeah.
In other words,
I've
once she
watched
does that, she's created a ton of Slayers. So there's, an opportunity to pick any kind of character and completely
follow them
create a
anywhere.
whole new and create a new universe, not a new universe, but a new story, a new world, new characters in the same universe.
Yeah. And the older actors could pop in for cameos. That would be huge fan service. People would love it. But
yeah, absolutely.
a 2024 Slayer set in, I don't know, Greece or New York City, or send them to South Africa. It wouldn't, anywhere would be good. Anywhere could have demons, anywhere could have a hellmouth. The possibilities are literally endless. Or go back in history and like investigate a Slayer from the 1800s or the 1600s.
That'd be cool.
I
really
always felt
interesting.
that they missed completely one of the greatest possible TV show spinoffs of all time with the Faith character.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I would have paid money to watch a series after the end of Angel and Buffy, where Faith like goes across country on a motorcycle encountering demons and vamps on
like
the way.
a like a Kung Fu
Daryl.
or Incredible Hulk.
Kind of like Kung Fu or the Hulk, right? Exactly. She's just trying to redeem herself and basically, process all that she's, dealing with now, and becomes a really good, solid, heroic Slayer.
That would have been great. There was also talk around the same time of a Giles spinoff set in England.
Yeah.
And I would have watched the hell out of that too.
Oh yeah.
I would have loved it.
That would have been amazing.
Especially if they had a lot of flashbacks to his teen years. And
Yeah.
we could have seen Ripper. That
Ripper
would have
in
been
action.
awesome. Oh, man.
Goodness.
Yeah, that would have been good.
It's time for us to summarize some of the pop culture references we heard in the episode.
So first up, we hear Cordelia say, "Check out Giles, The Next Generation," when she sees Wesley. And Star Trek, The Next Generation was a TV series starring Patrick Stewart, which ran from 1987 to 1994. It was the successor to the original 1960s Star Trek series, and it led to the movies Star Trek Generations in 1994, Star Trek First Contact in 1996, and Star Trek Insurrection in 1998.
I think we can all agree that Star Trek Generations was garbage.
It's like a universal truth at this point.
I mean, it's really bad. But Star Trek The Next Generation, the TV series, was incredibly important to me
Yeah.
in the late 80s, early 90s. I have a lot of memories of watching it with my two younger brothers, and the three of us still have a ton of inside jokes that are Star Trek The Next Generation based. We do a lot of "There Are Four Lights," like that comes up all the time. And I just the theme music from Star Trek The Next Generation, my dad used to always joke that it was dinner music because the syndicated episodes were on at 7.
That's
And
funny.
my dad loved to linger over a dinner table, and we, the kids, would always excuse ourselves so we could go watch Star Trek in the next room. And so he'd be like, there's the dinner music. So yeah, near and dear to my heart. Another moment, Faith says, "I hope evil takes MasterCard." MasterCard is one of the major credit card companies. They've been around since 1966 as the Interbank Card Association. They changed their name to MasterCard in the late 70s. And I have a MasterCard in my wallet right now.
Hey,
Yeah,
me too.
it's funny because there was a lot of humor, I remember growing up, around MasterCard,
Yeah.
but never about Visa.
It's not as funny of a name.
MasterCard? I guess. I don't
MasterCard
see
is
what's funny about it.
I don't know, the word master is
Maybe
there's just
master, yeah.
room to
yeah.
play there, but Visa is just not funny.
Yeah. The mayor says, "Well, this is exciting. A slayer up for murder 1. Murder 1 is first-degree murder, which in California and most states is defined as murder that is intentional or premeditated or that takes place during certain other crimes, including arson, rape, or robbery. This would make an interesting court case. It wasn't premeditated, nor did Faith intend to kill Finch, but she did intend to kill. So how would the judge jury react to the defense that she thought he was a vampire and that it's her duty to kill them?"
If I were a law professor, I would have this as a bonus point essay question on a crim law exam or something.
Penny, I think you should have taken this one.
Yeah,
You're the lawyer.
Oh, Kara's the prosecutor. Kara.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Oh,
I agree.
that's right. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was. Yeah, it's fascinating. There are so many different aspects of criminal law that Buffy would lend itself to be geeked out over.
It's
not
true.
enough time though.
They never went there either. They never really, a little bit with the police, but they never went to court.
The police of Sunnydale are deeply stupid.
They could never make a case. It would just never stick. Oh,
I got since we just talked, because I just occurred, there was one other thing from the episode, speaking about police, for all the problems with Joss Whedon, he was creatively very talented.
Oh,
and, you saw in this episode, there was a great scene where when the interview is going on between Buffy and the detective and Faith and the detective. And I just thought it was really creative and really cool how he cut each question to the other. So he'd ask the question of Buffy, but then Faith would answer. And then he'd ask the question to Faith, and then Buffy would answer. It was just a really cool, creative, visual way to do it. So,
I agree. That was some beautiful editing and writing.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And then, of course, next up, Faith says, when referring to Alan, the guy I offed was no Gandhi. And I do not want to butcher his real full name, but Gandhi, most commonly, I think, known as Mahatma Gandhi during this time, lived from 1869 to 1948. And he was an Indian political and spiritual leader, regarded as the father of independent India, and his title Mahatma means great soul. He led a life of abstinence and spirituality, supported passive resistance as a way to end British rule, and preached Christian and Muslim ethics along with Hindu. He was assassinated by a Hindu extremist who objected to his tolerance for Muslims. A period of mourning was observed by the UN, and Gandhi's teachings inspired nonviolent movements all around the globe, including civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., and his life was ultimately made into a movie in 1982 starring Ben Kingsley. So Faith is correct. Alan was definitely no Gandhi. That is true.
Oh, I'm so glad that I get this one. Faith at one point says, in response to the detective saying that the weapon was made out of wood, whoever did it wasn't hip to the Bronze Age. It's just a great line. The Bronze Age is the period in the development of technology when metals were first used regularly in the manufacture of tools and weapons. It falls between the Stone Age and the Iron Age.
That is such a classic Joss Whedon type line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just
it's like casual, quippy, teenagery, but with knowledge behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What my line here is, what does she say? I don't remember who she says this to.
I think she says it to Buffy.
Oh, yeah.
Buffy? Yeah. So Faith says to Buffy, "Little Miss Goody Two Shoes." The phrase Goody Two Shoes comes from the title of a moralistic nursery tale called The History of Little Goody Two Shoes, which is thought to have been written by Oliver Goldsmith and was published in 1765 by John Newbery. Goody owned only one shoe. When she was given a pair of them, she was so pleased that she showed them to everybody, saying, "Two shoes." The phrase, along with the phrase Goody Goody, now refers to a self-righteous, smugly virtuous person.
Well, that I had no idea what the origin of Goody Two
I
Shoes was.
Neither did I.
I had no idea. None.
Oh,
This is
man.
great that you guys do this. This is really cool. You know?
Thanks, Kirk.
We learn a lot.
Yeah, I think it's awesome.
Oh, man.
It's hard work.
Finally,
No,
Buffy.
you're doing all the research, I can imagine.
We love research. We're lawyers, so it works out.
I'm allergic to it myself, but
and I don't speak for all lawyers either. There are some lawyers that absolutely abhor research. But finally, our last little bit of a reference is from Buffy, who says, "Less than 24 hours ago, you killed a man, and now it's all zippity-doo-dah." And zippity-doo-dah is an exceedingly cheerful song from the 1946 very racist Disney movie, Song of the South.
Yeah. It's really hard
They played
to
it at
watch
the beginning of Splash Mountain.
Song of the South because Disney does not like for people to see it. It's pretty it's removed from all streaming services and I watched it.
It's basically a minstrel show put on TV, put on film.
Yeah, it's horrible, but I did see it in film school when we were talking about sort of the evolution of animation and racism in film. It's the kind of thing a film student should see, but
Absolutely.
it's, oh my God, it's so offensive that it's almost
watch.
It's almost funny again. It almost goes all the way around to self-parody, but not quite. And now it's time for trivia. When Buffy confronts Faith at the docks, the ship in the background is the Tanager. This same vessel also featured prominently in The Usual Suspects, the 1995 movie.
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen The Usual Suspects. I've heard so many good things about it, but I don't think I've ever watched
it's
it.
An enjoyable one.
Wesley is shocked to learn that Cordelia is a student at Sunnydale High and not a teacher as he first assumed or hoped.
Yeah.
Since this means that she is a lot younger than him, in real life, Charisma Carpenter, Cordelia, was 28 years old when this scene was filmed. Oh my God. And additionally, she is only 4 years younger than Alexis Denisoff, that's the guy who plays Wesley. In fact, in real life, Alexis Denisov would later go on to marry co-star Allison Hannigan, Willow, who was younger than him by 8 years. That's right. I forgot
That's
they were
funny.
married.
Yeah.
Yep. They're so cute. And next we have a deleted scene. The following conversation between Angel and Faith was cut, where Angel says, "You and me, Faith, we're a lot alike." And Faith, I love that, "Well, you're kind of dead." And Angel said, "Like I said, a lot alike." And Faith says, "Sorry, buddy, I'm alive and kicking. In fact, I've got a bodily function that needs attending to pretty quick here." And Angel says, "You're not alive. You're just running, afraid to feel, afraid to be touched." And Faith says, "Save it for Hallmark. I have to pee." Yeah, I can see why they cut
I
that.
see why they cut that. I find this last one really fascinating. There's a rumor that in the
Yes.
original storyline for this episode, Wesley was supposed to have been killed by Faith when she escapes from the council's custody. We never would have gotten the amazing Wesley arc that we are going to get,
Yeah.
which would
Yeah.
have been a real tragic loss. And if Faith had killed Wesley,
Yeah. No redemption then.
Yeah, point of no return.
I don't know
No.
how she would have come back from that.
No, I don't think there's any redemption from that at that point, you know.
I wonder if they changed it before they started production or if it was still something they were considering. And if they, met Alexis Denisof and they were like, let's keep him around. He makes Giles look extra sexy by
Yeah.
comparison.
Yeah, probably also though was it probably played into their what are where were they going long term with Faith too?
Yeah,
You know what
I
mean?
think so.
Yeah.
And if they if they wanted to come back to her at all, then they couldn't completely throw her over the edge.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. This brings us to the point in the episode where I ask this question. Does it still slay? Kirk, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Absolutely. It's, in fact, this is getting into the best period of Buffy for me. I mean, it starts with season 2, obviously, is but it's just really into gear by season 3 and the introduction of Faith and all of this aspect of her and the darkness and I just and Angel having a new mission. It just really all worked really, really well for me. I think they were running on full, all cylinders were going at this point. The dialogue, the characters, the relationships, the storyline, it was all just running real smooth right here.
I think so too. Kara, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. It definitely still slays. And it's just, like you're saying, Kirk, this is kind of Buffy at its best. And I think it started with the last episode where it sets everything up so perfectly for the future. And this one really kicks it into higher gear. And it's hard to think of a storyline that I enjoy better and I find more compelling than this Faith one that they're setting up. What about you, Penny?
Yeah, what do you think, Penny?
We talked about a couple of items that don't age all that well, mostly the Mr. Trick jokes, but overall, I think it absolutely slays and remains relevant to issues that are still going on with people today.
Oh yeah.
And I think I don't know if we're ever going to have a no to that question, but I'm going to keep asking it.
Well, you skipped season 1, right?
Yeah.
The ones that we may have said would not still slay are episodes that we did not cover.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think there are some down the road, in season 6.
There's some not
in
great
season
ones.
Even in season 5, there's 1 or 2. Season 7, there's a number of them, in my opinion, in season 7. But yeah, here they were really in their glory at this point.
Okay, so I think it's time for us to kick back, listen to some great music, have a blooming onion and a few beers, and head over to the Bronze and find out what our listeners had to say.
bronze things. Things of bronze.
Yes. First up this week is an email from Becky, who sent in her thoughts about this episode. She said, I adore Buffy's sheep PJs. I had some like that, but they were purple and had cows on them. Nice. How could I forget the Cordy Wesley stuff? The awkwardness during that meeting was cringeworthy. Faith's 2 words, jail and bait comment was brilliant. The only brilliant thing Faith does in this episode, sadly. I do love shredding papers, Mr. Mayor. Very therapeutic. It is kind of fun. Eliza does a phenomenal job of letting that guilty side of her come through for just a moment, then the mask slips right back on. Willow was so cute when Buffy showed up and started crying, and Willow, in her adorable, sweet Willow way, was talking about how she was being harsh and unleashed on Buffy. Love that girl. I am so proud of Giles for realizing Faith was lying to him. Another episode shedding light on just how special his and Buffy's relationship is, that he trusts she wouldn't have done that. That's a good point. And not talk to him about it. That was the moment it was obvious Faith was going down a dark path. I agree with that. After Buffy didn't tell Giles that Angel had returned from the Hell dimension, I don't think she would ever keep something big from him again.
Yeah.
Let's see. It was telling how when faced with hard truths, Faith tried to use sarcasm and sex as a defense mechanism, and when that didn't work, she was quick to anger. She does try that with Xander and Angel a bit.
Yeah.
The scene with Xander and Faith at her motel room was intense. Thank goodness Angel showed up when he did. I was so proud of Xander's speech. That line, "You're trying to hurt me, but right now you need someone by your side," was so sweet. He could have so easily slipped into the usual Xander mode, but he stood his ground and stayed strong and tried to help her. And classic Wesley jumping in and screwing things up. Though I do wonder if Angel was really getting through to Faith, or was she putting on a show? And Mr. Trick, always sassy, even when dying. R.I.P., you will be missed. Her favorite quotes are when Cordy meets Wesley, and Cordy says, Giles, the next generation. After Wesley screws up and Faith escapes, Wesley says, what can I do? I want to help. And Buffy says, still got your ticket back to the mother country?
That's a good line.
Oh, man. She said, I really enjoyed this episode. The writers did a great job showing the contrast in Buffy and Faith's lives. And while Eliza as Faith was obviously the main focus of the story, I want to give credit to how well Allison and Nicholas did. Their parts were so well acted and made them really stand out. Bravo to whoever picked the song Wish We Never Met by Kathleen Wilhoit. Such a fitting song for this whole episode. The line, when I don't get what I want, the spoiled child inside breaks down. So good. Fun fact, Kathleen played Luke's sister on Gilmore Girls. Oh, that's fun.
Oh, yeah, I know her.
Cool. That is neat. This episode showed how some, when backed into a corner, will do anything they can to save themselves, and even when surrounded by love and understanding, it isn't enough to make them want to change. Have a wonderful week/weekend. Grr, arg. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Becky.
Arg.
I love that.
We have 2 voicemails from our good friend Steve. One for last week's episode and one from this week's. So I'm just going to play them in a row.
Hello, still slaying. This is Steve, and this is going to be for Bad Girls. I'm sorry I missed the deadline. It's been a crazy couple of weeks for me. I appreciate being on for the Zeppo, though. It was a great episode. I was glad to be on it and glad to listen to it, and can't wait to hear these next 2. I'm going to record Bad Girls and Consequences back to back. Faith asking Buffy about whether she's done it with Xander or not is hilarious. I had to pause. Mr. Trick, nobody can tell Marmaduke what to do. That's my kind of dog. Okay, if it hasn't been said before, I'll say it now. Harry Groner, is that how you say his name? As the mayor is probably one of the best villains in Buffy history. I mean, Angelus was crude. Spike, has an arc, so that's great, but nobody tops the mayor. We do see there is a bit of a change in Xander from the last episode to this one. You know, he's bantering with Cordelia much more. What's the word I'm thinking of? Anyway, it's confidently. Yeah, confidence. Is he evil? Like several times. Is he evil? Not in the strictest sense. I've always loved and afterwards I get a cookie from Buffy in this when Wesley Wyndham Price. You got to say all three names every time is giving her the plan. Okay, so Buffy goes to the crypt. She opens both of the coffins, and then she sees that one has the amulet, one doesn't. She jumps into the one that doesn't. It's pretty smart. Oh, and leaves the one that's open with the amulet. Okay, Wesley and Giles together. Knock yourself out, please, please. I never caught that before. She said they were out in Magnum Force. That's a Dirty Harry movie. I love Giles' response to, "You're not helping." Yeah, I know, and I feel sick about it. Hey, as much as I love this scene post Buffy and Faith attacking this nest, what club is this bouncing at in the middle of the day? Is that the right word? I don't know. Okay, I know I'm running along. So Balthazar is alive. What? Oh, the grossest demon ever in Buffy history. Oops. I guess want, take, have. Not a good philosophy to live by. Oh, Alan, maybe let that vampire in, you think? Oh, Balthazar just said it's been 100 years since my enemy crippled me, and now he's on the eve, and we know the mayor is coming up close to something important. I don't want to spoil anything. That might be important. Sorry, I've gone long on this one. So the big deal about this episode, obviously, is Faith kills a person, and we're going to see more of that in the next episode. I will talk to you then.
I love Steve's live Steves. They're so fun. All right. And here is for consequences.
Whoa. Okay. A whole lot more happened at the end of Bad Girls than I remembered when I ended my last voicemail. But gosh, we're going to pick up consequences right where we left off in a bad place. Okay. I'm not going to lie. It took me like 12 tries to spell consequences correctly for this email. And no spoilers. The Cordelia Wesley whatever begins. I've talked about this before. In my defense, Christopher Carpenter, the actor, is the same age as me. So I don't feel like a dirty old man.
That's
and
not
neither should
creepy
Wesley.
at all.
Well, yeah, he should, because she's in the story. I can't defend anything. Oh, it was good to have a D-Rat Amy reference in there.
Yeah, that's right.
Whoa,
We forgot to
okay, this is
mention
a big
that.
deal.
Yeah.
That she never got a vibe off the mayor until now. So now she knows the mayor is a big bad. Ooh, I just realized that Faith's disposition, because she just said, like she said, we are better. She thinks she's above the law. Okay, so it's good. Questioned by the police, they kept to their story at least. Oh, Willow, kill things with your bare hands. That was probably the wrong way to say that. Oh, I remember this when she comes to Giles to confess. I love the misdirect here that we think that Giles believed Faith, but there's no amount of evidence, no moment where he believed Faith at all. Yeah. She has many talents, but lying is not one of them. Whoa, that's a lot of numbers that Wesley just dialed to get to Quentin Travers. I understand overseas is a lot of numbers, but gosh. Yeah, Xander, everybody gets it except you. And yeah, Willow gets it first. Oh, Xander, going to Faith was just a big mistake. Yeah, the Watchers Council is going to take Faith away from you, Angel, and they have other plans. So they're all looking for Faith, and Buffy heads to the docks, and that's where she is. And then, of course, Faith is the one that takes out Mr. Trick. Well, okay, here we go. On to next week.
Thanks, Steve.
Nice.
Thanks, Steve.
And if you haven't listened to the episode about the Zeppo, I recommend it because we had a great time talking about that.
That was a fun one to
very
listen
I can
silly
imagine.
episode. Unfortunately, Kara couldn't be with us that day, but
I was so bummed.
Steve and Jason and I had a blast.
Yeah, y'all did a great job. I enjoyed listening to that one after the fact, for sure.
Thank you. All right, that is the end of the main section of the podcast. Stay tuned for the Watcher's Diaries at the end if you want to hear the spoiler discussion.
If you'd like to join the conversation, you can find all of our contact information at podcastica.com and in the show notes for each episode. Also at podcastica.com, you'll find links to our social media pages and all our other shows.
I have been really enjoying Welcome to the Apocalypse, and it's not like any other Podcastica podcast because it's a narrative about 3 wacky characters improv comedying their way through the zombie apocalypse. It's incredibly silly, and I really recommend it. I guested on one episode, and I had the time of my life, and yeah, I just want people to listen. It's great.
That has been a really fun one to listen to. I've still been, tuning in to the coverage of The Ones Who Live with Jason and Lucy, especially the last couple episodes. Those were intense, but I've been enjoying their coverage and all the listener feedback on that one for sure.
I have not been listening to podcasts right now, so my
That's
apologies.
fair.
That's okay. You can't always listen.
I have
to
been
all of
watching. I've been watching some shows.
Yeah.
Just recently watched the Apple TV's sci-fi Constellation. Have you
Oh,
heard
I
of
haven't
it?
started that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness
It looks
sakes!
good.
It is trippy and it's awesome.
Oh,
I highly
sweet.
recommend it. Yeah, you're
Okay.
gonna
Good
enjoy
to
it.
know.
I will check that out when I finish
Love
Shōgun.
it.
Yep.
Oh man, I like it. Well, if all of you listening like what we do, please give us a 5-star rating should you feel so inclined, a review or a like, follow, and subscribe. Next time we'll be covering season 3, episode 16, Dopplegangland. I am so excited about
Yeah,
that one.
that's one of my favorites. Yeah.
It's so good. Thanks everyone, and
Oh,
I don't need to say oh. I got it before. They slept together.
all right. That's the end of the non-spoiler section of the podcast. If you want to avoid spoilers, you should stop listening
Right about
now.
meow.
Like right now.
Meow. Right, meow.
Right, meow. And now we are on to the Watcher's Diaries, where we can talk all the spoilers we want to talk.
It's too bad we can't sneak a look at the Watcher Diaries. I'm sure it's full of fun facts to know and tell.
Yeah. That's too bad. That stuff is private.
Also, Giles keeps them in his office, in his personal files.
Most importantly, it would be wrong.
And we can finally say things like, it's going to be so awesome when Wesley and Faith meet up again in season 1 of Angel, and she tortures him.
Yep. So special.
She has that amazing line where she's like, there's 4 basic types of torture: sharp, blunt, hot, and loud.
Yep.
I think about that all the time because I'm like, oh, there's other kinds of
Terrifying.
torture. But
Yeah.
in the moment, it is pretty terrifying. And she really goes to town on him.
It's dark. It's
Yeah.
really, really dark. And they did such a great job too of just portraying his trauma from that as the series went on.
Yeah.
I mean, he really suffered from that and
Ugh.
carried scars and was damaged by that.
Yeah, and the guilt
for
he
a
had.
long time.
He
Yeah.
feels a lot of guilt about Faith going dark in the first place because he
Right.
was her watcher and he didn't
Yep.
Yeah.
save her.
But it's so beautifully set up their future relationship. I mean, to the point where, he's the one that goes and breaks her out of jail.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't break her out. She breaks out, but he
gets
he
her.
goes, he bites
Yeah.
the bullet and he's like, she's the only one, even though I'm terrified of her.
Yeah.
She's the one that can do this.
And she's like, I'm not going to apologize. And he's like, you don't need to. It's we're good. Like he goes through his own darkness journey.
Yeah.
So by then,
yeah.
by the time that happens,
he can relate.
he can really relate to her. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, Faith just sets up such excellent conflict and dense storylines with so many different characters. And I cannot wait to see that whole, we talk about the beginning of Angel and Faith's friendship and relationship. And there's that particular episode on Angel, that crossover where Buffy, goes to Angel and tracks down Faith, and in that moment, Faith or Angel essentially chooses Faith to protect Faith over Buffy. And that was such a huge moment. And it's still, when I watched it when I was younger, it made me really ragey. So I'll be curious to see how I react once we get to it.
It made you really what?
Ragey.
Ragey, yeah.
That he picked
At her?
At Angel and
At
Faith.
Angel.
For choosing for choosing Faith over Buffy, but it's the right decision.
On it now, I'm like, yeah, he was right. Like
Yeah.
he did the right thing.
Faith needed him,
be...
and Buffy didn't. And he and Buffy weren't together anymore as a couple.
Right.
In fact, she like throws Riley in his face on that visit too. She's like, I have someone new who loves me.
Yeah, I think that was a necessary. Jesus, can I not say necessary? Good Lord, that was twice. Anyway, I think that was a necessary moment for Buffy to kind of be put in her place a little bit and be reminded that she is no longer, necessarily priority number one in Angel's life. Even though she's still meaningful, they will always have something. She can't really throw her weight around with him in the same way as she used to.
Yeah, or take him for granted. He's like got his own life, and she's got her own life. It's it's such a great crossover episode. It's so good.
It really is.
Absolutely. His mission changed, I mean, his initial mission was to basically redeem himself by helping her and protecting her, and then falls in love with her. His redemption arc changed. Now it's about, helping people who are dealing with the same darkness he's had to deal with.
Yeah.
And Faith needed that.
Yeah.
And Buffy had so much support elsewhere. He knew she would be okay.
Yeah.
It's an amazing arc.
Yeah, it really is.
I love
and
it.
The relationship we're finally going to get to go into with the mayor and Faith. It's just so cheeky and fantastic,
wholesome in its own weird way.
Like, that's my girl.
Well, he becomes like a father figure for her.
Yeah, and he's always trying to get her to like eat better and pull your hair back so I could see your pretty face, and all these very like sort of typical parental feelings for Faith. And that at the same time, he's like, go murder this person for me, and here's a gift of a really big, scary knife. Like, their relationship
and a giant,
is
fantastic
bizarre.
apartment.
Yeah, that's why I found him more scary than any other villains.
Yes. Yeah. It's so much scarier when it's kind of subtle and done with a smile on his face.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just unsettling.
Cloaked in wholesomeness. It's like, it's sneaky and
like Ted.
And scary. Yeah, like Ted.
Yeah.
Ted is sort of the proto-mayor, right?
Yeah.
I'm not wired that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Once he's invincible, and is it Giles that throws a sword at him through him, and the mayor just like kind of staggers back a little bit, and it's like it's this huge inconvenience that he has to pull the sword out.
Yeah. First, Angel throws a letter opener at him, and it goes through his hand.
The hand.
Right.
That is good.
And then, Giles stabs him because he's being rude to Buffy.
Yeah. It's like, surprise, he's
I
invincible.
love that scene when the mayor is like trying to give a lecture to Angel and Buffy about their relationship, and he's like, you should respect your elders, and Angel's like, fuck you. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
He's like, I got a lot of years on you. Like, you're not my elder.
A lot of years.
Yeah. Oh gosh. That's
now
fantastic.
didn't Faith come on to Spike, or was it Spike came on to Faith in season 7? Wasn't there a whole thing?
There's
with
a
them
flirtation. Yeah. She reminds him of how she like sort of came on to him when she was in Buffy's body.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's like, oh, right. Yeah. But by then, he is so loyal to Buffy, there's no chance he would have slept with Faith.
Season 7 Spike just
It's a weird season all around.
Yeah, well, there are certain aspects that I will never forgive them for, but overall,
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
You know,
It has-
Spike.
I mean,
It's
the
uneven.
idea that he voluntarily goes and gets a soul
Yeah.
just so that he can give, be for her what he wants to be, and make himself whole. I mean, when Angel didn't have a choice in that.
Yeah.
You know
And
what I
he
mean?
later on Angel, he
Yep.
sort of lords it over Angel. He's like,
Oh, yes.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
fantastic.
Yeah.
He's petty. He's
Yeah.
petty.
And he hates Angel. Some of my
Oh,
favorite
God.
scenes are that last season of Angel between Spike and Angel and how they
Yeah.
just do not like each other.
No.
And it
No.
never stops being funny.
Well, and that's
But
one
yet
of the
there's-
best intros too. The way that Spike, dying on, since we're in the spoiler section, dying on Buffy, thinking he's making this huge sacrifice, and then he's in LA
Right.
with Angel. And it's
Yeah.
like, what the hell, man?
But it's also they're very much like brothers.
Yeah, they
Oh, yeah.
understand each other.
They've been through so much together. They've been immortal enemies. They've been teammates. They've lived, loved, died, whatever together, and they've been through this since the beginning. And Angel did such a great job, the series, of giving us those flashbacks and those stories from the past that gave
Those are
so
great
much more
episodes.
depth and richness to the present storylines,
Yeah.
and characters. I just loved it.
I'm so
I
excited
really want
to
to watch
get there.
ahead. I won't do it.
Don't watch ahead. Don't watch ahead.
I won't, but I'm so excited to get to that point.
All right. I think that's it. That's the complete end of our show. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And until next time, I'm Penny.
I'm Kirk, and I appreciate being on. Thank you so much. I really love
Yes.
Buffy, and I really love the opportunity to come on and talk with you guys. You're wonderful. This has been a real thrill and a lot of fun.
Well,
and,
you'll have to come back.
For sure.
I'd love to.
It was great to have you. And as always, I'm Kara.
Keep
slaying. Yay. Audacity.
That was awesome. Thank you guys.
That
so
was
much.